My name is Madison Walker, and I just turned 22 years old. My life changed forever when my grandfather Benjamin, the tech mogul, who raised me like his own daughter, handed me the keys to his $120 million empire. What should have been the happiest day of my life quickly turned into a nightmare when my mother and her new husband decided they had other plans for my inheritance. If you think family drama is bad in your house, just wait until you hear what happened next. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more unbelievable but true family stories like mine. Growing up, I was always a grandpa's girl. Benjamin Walker wasn't just my grandfather. He was my hero, my mentor, and often my only real parent. From the time I could walk, I'd follow him around his home office, watching in awe as he built what would become Walker Technologies from the ground up. My earliest memories are sitting on his lap while he explained complicated business concepts to me, as if they were bedtime stories. The business world isn't just about numbers, Madison. He would tell me, his eyes twinkling behind his wire-rimmed glasses. It's about vision, integrity, and understanding people. Meanwhile, my relationship with my mother Elizabeth was always complicated. She was young when she had me, just 23. And I think she always resented how parenthood limited her social life. Dad tried to keep our family together, but their fighting became unbearable. When I was 15, they finally divorced and my world shattered. The next few years were a blur of weekend visits and holiday arrangements. My dad moved across the country for work, and while we stayed close through calls and occasional visits, my daily support came from Grandpa Benjamin. He made sure to attend every school event my parents missed, celebrated every achievement, and was there to dry my tears through every teenage heartbreak. When I turned 18, I enrolled in business school at my grandfather's alma mater. It wasn't just because of him, though his proud smile when I got accepted was worth every late night of studying. I genuinely loved business strategy, marketing, psychology, and organizational leadership. During summer breaks, I interned at different departments of Walker Technologies, learning the company from the ground up, just as my grandfather had built it. Things changed dramatically when I was 20. My mother, who had been dating casually for years, suddenly announced she was getting married to Robert Chambers, a man she'd known for only 6 months. Robert was polished, charming in public, and seemed to make my mother happy, so I tried to be supportive despite my reservations. The first time I met Robert at a family dinner, something felt off. He asked too many questions about Grandpa's company, his eyes calculating behind his perfect smile. When he learned I was studying business and interning at Walker Technologies, his interest in me increased substantially. "Madison here is going to take over the family business someday. Aren't you, sweetheart?" Grandpa had said proudly during dessert. I'll never forget how Robert's expression flickered for just a moment before he raised his glass. To future success, he toasted, but there was something cold in his eyes. After the wedding, my mother changed. She became increasingly distant from me, and completely enthralled with Robert and his lifestyle. They bought a massive house in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, started throwing lavish parties, and my mother began dropping casual comments about when Robert joins the family business. Grandpa Benjamin noticed the change too. At 80, his health was beginning to decline, though his mind remained razor sharp. I'd catch him watching Robert during family gatherings, his expression guarded. Once, when we were alone in his study, he confided in me. "That man has an agenda, Madison," he said quietly. "I've met hundreds of Robert Chamberses in my time. Men who see shortcuts where they should see responsibility." I nodded, relieved I wasn't the only one who sensed it. "Mom doesn't see it. She thinks he walks on water." Grandpa patted my hand. "Your mother has always been looking for someone to solve her problems rather than facing them herself. But you're different, Madison. You see people for who they really are." The tension between Grandpa and Robert grew over the next 2 years. Robert would make suggestions about modernizing the company structure, which always somehow involved giving himself a prominent role. Grandpa would listen politely, then completely ignore the advice. This drove Robert crazy, though he tried to hide it. As my 22nd birthday approached, Grandpa's health took another downturn. He was hospitalized briefly with pneumonia, which terrified all of us. When he recovered, there was a new urgency to his actions. He began having long meetings with his lawyers, reviewing company documents, and making mysterious phone calls that he wouldn't explain. "Just getting my affairs in order," he'd say with a wink whenever I asked. "At my age, it's just good sense." I worried he was preparing for the worst, but he assured me he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. "I've got too much to see yet, Madison. Too many of your triumphs to witness." The week before my birthday, I graduated with my business degree summa cum laude. My parents attended the ceremony with my dad flying in specially, but it was Grandpa's fierce hug afterward that meant the most. "You're ready," he whispered in my ear, which I assumed was just about being ready for the adult world. I had no idea that my grandfather had been planning something that would change all our lives forever, or that my birthday celebration would become a battlefield for the future of our family legacy. My 22nd birthday fell on a perfect June Saturday. Grandpa insisted on hosting the celebration at his estate, a beautiful property with sprawling gardens that had been in our family for 3 generations. When I arrived that afternoon, I was stunned by the transformation. The gardens were decorated with thousands of twinkling lights. There was a small orchestra set up on the terrace, and caterers bustled around preparing what looked like a feast for royalty rather than a simple birthday party. "Grandpa, this is way too much," I protested, when I found him supervising the final arrangements, leaning slightly on his cane. "Nonsense," he replied with a mysterious smile. 22 is a very special birthday, the day a caterpillar becomes a butterfly." The guests began arriving at 6. In addition to my immediate family, Grandpa had invited extended relatives. I rarely saw several of his closest business associates, and many of my friends from college. My father arrived alone, giving me a warm hug and pressing a small wrapped box into my hand. "For later," he whispered. My mother and Robert made a grand entrance 30 minutes after everyone else, my mother dripping in diamonds that I knew were new courtesy of Robert's recently upgraded spending habits. Dinner was served at elegantly decorated tables in the garden. The conversation flowed along with excellent wine, and for once even Robert seemed to be on his best behavior, charming the business associates seated near him. If I noticed him paying particular attention to Walter Jenkins, the head of our company's largest competitor, I didn't think much of it at the time. After dessert was served, Grandpa rose from his seat at the head of the main table, tapping his glass gently for attention. The conversations died down, as everyone turned to look at him standing tall despite his age, his white hair gleaming in the soft lighting. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my beautiful granddaughter Madison," he began, his voice strong and clear across the garden. "Some of you have known her since she was a tiny thing with pigtails and skin knees running through these very gardens. Others have met the remarkable young woman she's become, with her brilliant mind and kind heart." I felt my cheeks flush with emotion as he continued. "When I started Walker Technologies 46 years ago, I had a dream of building something that would outlast me, something that would make a difference in the world and provide for my family for generations to come. Through hard work, some luck, and the support of many people in this garden tonight, that little startup grew into a company valued today at $120 million. There were appreciative murmurs around the tables. While the company's success wasn't a secret hearing, the valuation stated so plainly was still impressive. As I've grown older, Grandpa continued, my thoughts have turned more and more to legacy. Not just what we build, but who we entrust it to. Who will carry forward not just the business but the values, the vision, the responsibility to our employees and our community. I noticed Robert straightening in his chair, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. My mother reached over to squeeze his hand, a gesture that didn't escape my grandfather's notice. Madison, Grandpa turned to me, his eyes shining with emotion. "From the time you were small, you've shown the same passion for innovation, the same integrity, and the same care for people that I've tried to make the foundation of our company. You've worked in every department, learning from the ground up, earning the respect of our employees through your own merit, not just your name." He gestured to one of his lawyers, who approached with a leather portfolio. "That's why, on your 22nd birthday, I am transferring majority ownership of Walker Technologies to you, effective immediately." The garden fell completely silent. I stared at my grandfather in shock, certain I'd misheard him. Across the table, my mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips, and Robert's satisfied smile vanished like it had been wiped away. "The paperwork is all prepared," Grandpa continued calmly, as if he hadn't just dropped an emotional bomb. 60% ownership transfers to you today. I'll retain 25%, with the remaining 15% divided among our long-term executives as previously arranged. You'll assume the title of CEO when you feel ready, with me serving as advisor for as long as you need. The lawyer approached, opening the portfolio to reveal official-looking documents. In a daze, I watched as Grandpa signed his name with a flourish, then held out the pen to me. "Madison," he prompted gently. "That is, if you accept." Finding my voice at last, I stood on shaky legs. "Grandpa, I don't know what to say. Are you sure?" His eyes, so like my own, held mine steadily. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." With trembling fingers, I took the pen and signed where indicated, feeling the weight of the moment like a physical presence. As soon as I finished, the garden erupted in applause, led enthusiastically by my father and many of the company executives present. Not everyone was applauding, though. My mother sat frozen, her face a mask of forced pleasantness that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her, Robert was visibly struggling to compose himself, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. When the noise died down, I found my voice again. "Thank you, Grandpa. I promise to honor everything you've built and everything you've taught me. I know I have so much still to learn, but I'll work every day to be worthy of this trust." The celebration continued, with guests coming to congratulate me, but there was a new undercurrent of tension. I overheard snippets of conversations speculating about the implications, wondering if I was ready, questioning my grandfather's decision. Later, as the party was winding down, I found a quiet moment with Grandpa in his study. "Why now?" I asked him. "I thought you'd stay at the helm for years yet." He smiled, looking more relaxed than he had in months. "The right time is when the right person is ready. You're ready, Madison. And I'm not going anywhere, just stepping back enough to watch you soar." His expression turned more serious, and frankly, I didn't like some of the circling I've been seeing lately. "Robert," I said, not a question. Grandpa nodded. "Among others. The vultures always circle when they think there's weakness. I wanted to make it clear where the strength in this family lies." He patted my hand. "Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow might be a bit stormy." I had no idea just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The morning after my birthday celebration, I woke up early, despite having been up late. The events of the previous evening still felt surreal, and I kept glancing at the copy of the ownership documents on my nightstand to convince myself it hadn't been a dream. By 8:30, I was showered and dressed, heading downstairs for breakfast at my mother and Robert's house, where I'd been living since graduating college. The kitchen was eerily quiet when I entered. My mother sat at the island counter, a cup of coffee untouched in front of her, while Robert paced near the windows overlooking the backyard pool. They both looked up when I entered, and the tension in the room hit me like a physical wall. "Good morning," I said cautiously, moving toward the coffee machine. "Sit down, Madison," Robert said, his voice clipped. "We need to talk." I poured my coffee first, taking my time, then took a seat across from my mother. Her eyes were red-rimmed, either from crying or lack of sleep, possibly both. "About last night," my mother began, her voice unnaturally high. "Your grandfather's gesture was very dramatic. It was irresponsible, is what it was," Robert cut in, abandoning his pacing, to stand behind my mother, hands on her shoulders, in what looked more possessive than supportive. "Benjamin has always had a flair for the theatrical, but this takes the cake." I took a slow sip of my coffee. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision if that's what you're implying. Grandpa's been planning this for some time. That's exactly the problem, Robert said, his calm facade beginning to crack. Major business decisions like this should involve family consultation. There are implications he clearly hasn't considered. Such as, I asked, keeping my voice level. Such as the fact that you're 22 years old with zero real-world experience, he snapped. A company worth $120 million needs experienced leadership, not a college graduate playing businesswoman. My mother reached up to pat his hand as if calming him. What Robert means, honey, is that this is a lot of responsibility to put on your shoulders all at once. We're concerned about you. The fake sweetness in her voice set my teeth on edge. My mother hadn't been concerned about me in years, certainly not since Robert entered the picture. I appreciate the concern, I said carefully, but Grandpa and I have discussed this extensively. I've worked in every department of the company over the past 4 years. I know the business, the employees, the products. Internships aren't the same as leadership, Robert countered. Which is why your mother and I have come up with a solution that makes sense for everyone. Here it comes, I thought. I'll step in as interim CEO, he announced, as if conferring a great favor. Just temporarily, of course, while you continue learning the business from the inside. In a few years, when you have more experience, we can revisit the leadership question. The audacity was so breathtaking I almost laughed. That won't be necessary, I said firmly. As majority shareholder, I'll be working directly with the executive team with Grandpa's guidance. There's no role for you in this scenario, Robert. His face darkened. Don't be naive, Madison. Do you really think suppliers, investors, and employees are going to take orders from a girl barely out of college? This arrangement will damage the company's reputation and tank its value. The company was doing just fine before you appeared in our lives, I pointed out, and it will continue to do so without your involvement. My mother slammed her hand on the counter. Madison, Robert is trying to help you. This hostility is completely uncalled for. I turned to her, genuinely baffled. Mom, why are you fighting so hard for him to control what Grandpa explicitly left to me? This is our family legacy. And Robert is family now, she shot back. He has years of business experience you lack. He's only thinking of what's best for everyone. What business experience exactly, I asked, remembering my grandfather's warnings. Because I've never actually heard any specifics about Robert's illustrious business career before he married you. Robert's face flushed dark red. Watch yourself, young lady. Your attitude is completely out of line. No, I said, standing up. What's out of line is you two conspiring to take over a company that doesn't belong to you. The paperwork is signed. I am the majority owner of Walker Technologies, not you. My mother stood as well, her eyes flashing with anger I'd rarely seen directed at me. If that's your attitude, then you can make your own way in the world without our support. If you won't listen to reason about the company, then you can pack your bags and leave this house. I stared at her, stunned by the ultimatum. You'd throw out your own daughter over this. You're choosing a company over family, she said coldly. Actions have consequences, Madison. This isn't about the company, I realized aloud. This is about money. How much of my inheritance were you planning to funnel into your joint accounts, Robert? Robert took a threatening step toward me, but was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. A moment later, our housekeeper appeared in the kitchen doorway. Mr. Walker is here to see Miss Madison, she announced. Before anyone could respond, my grandfather walked in behind her, leaning on his cane but looking remarkably spry for a man who'd hosted a major event the night before. Good morning, family, he said cheerfully, apparently oblivious to the tension. I thought I might find you all having a chat about last night's announcement. Robert quickly composed his features into a welcoming smile. Benjamin, we were just discussing some practical concerns about the transition. Perhaps you and I could have a man-to-man conversation about alternative arrangements that might be more appropriate. Grandpa settled himself at the counter, accepting the coffee the housekeeper quickly brought him. No need for that, Robert. The arrangements are final. He turned to me with a wink. I assume they've suggested you're too young and inexperienced and Robert should take over temporarily. My mother gasped. How did you? Because I've been in business for over 40 years, Elizabeth Grandpa said mildly. I can spot a takeover attempt from a mile away, even a clumsy one. He took a sip of his coffee. And I hear Madison is being asked to leave if she doesn't comply. I nodded, still shocked by my mother's ultimatum. Grandpa chuckled softly. Well, that moves us right along to phase 2 then. Phase 2, Robert repeated, looking suddenly wary. Oh yes, Grandpa said, his eyes twinkling with what I now recognized as mischief. Transferring the company was just phase 1. I thought we might need a bit more time before phase 2, but you two have expedited the timeline quite efficiently. After my grandfather's cryptic comment about phase 2, the morning deteriorated further. My mother, seemingly emboldened by Robert's presence, doubled down on her ultimatum. Either I would agree to Robert's temporary leadership of Walker Technologies, or I needed to move out immediately. This is ridiculous, I said, looking between them. You're seriously kicking me out because I won't hand over my inheritance to your husband. This isn't about the money, my mother insisted, though her flushed face suggested otherwise. This is about you refusing to accept guidance from people with more experience. Your attitude has become impossible. Grandpa, who had been watching this exchange with remarkable calm, finally stood up. Madison, perhaps it would be best if you did move out. My guest house is sitting empty, and it would give you some independence. I stared at him, feeling betrayed until I caught the subtle wink he gave me when my mother and Robert weren't looking. Fine, I said after a moment. I'll pack my things. Robert smirked triumphantly, clearly believing this was the beginning of my capitulation. How little he understood me, or my grandfather. I went upstairs to my bedroom, the same room I'd decorated as a teenager after my parents' divorce. Looking around at the photos, books, and mementos of my life, I felt a wave of sadness. Not for the room itself, but for the final shattering of the illusion that my mother would ever choose me over her own comfort and desires. As I packed, memories flooded back. The night my parents told me they were divorcing, when I'd cried myself to sleep in this very room. The day I got my college acceptance letter and ran to show my mother, only to find she was out shopping with friends. Countless birthdays and achievements where Grandpa showed up instead of her. I'd made excuses for her my whole life, but maybe it was time to see the truth for what it was. There was a soft knock at the door, and Grandpa entered, closing it behind him. You're doing the right thing, he said quietly, sitting on the edge of my bed, while I folded clothes into a suitcase. Sometimes the hardest part of growing up is recognizing when relationships need to change. She's my mother, I said, my voice breaking slightly. How can she choose him over me so easily? Grandpa sighed heavily. Elizabeth has always taken the path of least resistance. Robert is providing the lifestyle she wants, and she'll do whatever necessary to maintain that, including using you as a pawn. He reached out to squeeze my hand. But you are stronger than she is, Madison. You always have been. Within 2 hours, I had packed everything important into my car. My mother didn't come to say goodbye, remaining upstairs in her room. Robert, however, made sure to be present in the foyer as I carried out my last box. This little tantrum doesn't change anything, he said in a low voice. You'll come to your senses once you realize how in over your head you are. The offer to let me handle things remains open for now. I looked him directly in the eyes. I wouldn't let you manage a lemonade stand, Robert, let alone my company. His smug expression faltered for a moment. Your loss. Don't come crying back when it all falls apart. I followed my grandfather's car to his estate, a beautiful property about 20 minutes from my mother's house. The guest house he'd mentioned was actually a charming 2-bedroom cottage at the edge of the property, with its own garden and a small stream running nearby. This is gorgeous, Grandpa, I said as he showed me around. But are you sure you want me staying here? I could find an apartment. Nonsense, he replied. This place has been sitting empty since your grandmother's sister moved to Florida last year. Besides, I think we'll need to strategize over the coming days, and having you close by will make that easier. After he left me to settle in, I sat alone on the cottage's small porch, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. From being gifted a major company to being thrown out of my home, it felt like emotional whiplash. My phone rang, displaying my mother's number. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Madison," she began without preamble. "This has gone far enough. Come home and we'll discuss a reasonable compromise." "A compromise where Robert gets control of my company isn't reasonable, Mom." She made an exasperated sound. "You're being childish. Robert has contacts, experience, connections you don't have. He could double the company's value in 5 years. If he's such a business genius, why isn't he already running his own successful company?" I asked. The silence that followed was telling. "That's what I thought," I continued. "I'm not coming back under these conditions. I'm going to run the company Grandpa entrusted to me, and I'm going to do it without Robert's interference." "Then don't expect any support from me," she said coldly before hanging up. I sat staring at my phone for a long time afterward. Then it began to ring again, this time with calls from company executives and managers who had heard rumors about the ownership change. Some were congratulatory, others clearly concerned about what the transition would mean for them. The call from Janet Parker, our longtime chief financial officer, who had worked with my grandfather for over 15 years, was particularly insightful. "Madison, I need to warn you," she said after congratulating me. "Robert has been meeting with several board members over the past month, suggesting that your grandfather is no longer competent to make business decisions. He's been laying groundwork for some kind of power play." The revelation didn't surprise me, but the timing did. He's been planning this for a month, before Grandpa even announced the transfer. "Longer suspect," Janet replied. "He's also been asking a lot of questions about our Silicon Valley properties and some of our patent portfolios, specifically which ones could be spun off or sold separately from the main company." A chill ran down my spine. "He's looking to break up the company for quick cash." "That would be my assessment," Janet agreed. "Your grandfather was right to act when he did." After we hung up, I spent the rest of the evening researching company bylaws and ownership rights, making notes of potential vulnerabilities Robert might try to exploit. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me as my mind raced with strategies and concerns. Around midnight, there was a knock at the cottage door. I opened it to find my grandfather still fully dressed, despite the late hour. "I thought you might be up," he said, holding up a folder. "There are some things you should see before tomorrow." "What's happening tomorrow?" I asked, letting him in. "Your first day as official owner," he replied, spreading the papers on the kitchen table. "And if I know Robert, he's not going to make it easy for you." Grandpa walked me through various company documents, pointing out important clauses and agreements I needed to be familiar with. As the night wore on, he finally addressed the elephant in the room. "You should be prepared for what you'll face tomorrow," he said gravely. "Robert has been working behind the scenes for months. He's going to try to undermine you with the board and the executive team." "Why would he do all this?" I asked. "He barely knows the company." Grandpa's expression was grim. "Because Robert Chambers isn't who he claims to be. His real name is Robert Chamberlain, and he's been involved in 3 corporate takeovers in the past decade, each time marrying into a family with business interests, gaining control, selling off assets, and moving on." The revelation stunned me. "Does Mom know?" "I doubt it. Your mother sees what she wants to see. But I've had a private investigator looking into him since they got engaged. The report only came back fully last week." He reached over to squeeze my hand. "Get some rest, Madison. Be prepared for tomorrow." As he left, he turned back with one last comment. "Oh, and don't worry too much. I've been preparing for this possibility longer than Robert has been plotting. Just remember that sometimes you need to let your opponents reveal themselves fully before you make your move." I fell into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of boardrooms and betrayals with my grandfather's enigmatic words echoing in my mind. I arrived at the Walker Technologies headquarters at 7:30 the next morning, earlier than most of the executive team typically came in. The modern glass and steel building that housed our 200 employees stood as a testament to my grandfather's vision, having been designed to maximize natural light and collaborative spaces long before such concepts became trendy. In corporate architecture, my plan was to settle into my new office, formerly a conference room adjacent to my grandfather's suite before the workday officially began. However, as the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The lights in my grandfather's office were already on, and I could hear voices inside. When I rounded the corner, I stopped short. Robert was sitting behind my grandfather's desk, surrounded by 3 board members I recognized from my birthday party. They all looked up in surprise when I appeared in the doorway. Madison. Robert recovered quickly, his tone condescending. "We weren't expecting you so early. I'm just having a preliminary discussion with some of the board about transition plans." I stepped fully into the room, setting my bag down deliberately on the conference table. "In an office that isn't yours regarding a transition that doesn't involve you. Interesting approach." One of the board members, Harold Winters, had the grace to look uncomfortable. The other 2, Marcus Reed and Victor Sandoval, exchanged glances that confirmed my suspicion they were already in Robert's pocket. "Perhaps we should call an emergency board meeting," Marcus suggested smoothly, "to clarify the leadership structure moving forward." "Excellent idea," I agreed, surprising them. "Let's do that. 9 o'clock in the main boardroom. That gives everyone enough time to arrive." Robert's smile tightened. He clearly hadn't expected me to embrace the confrontation so readily. "9 o'clock it is. I'll have Janice send out the notification." "No need," I replied, pulling out my phone. "As majority shareholder, I'll call the meeting myself." I began typing an email to the entire board and executive team, while still maintaining eye contact with Robert. "And since we're discussing company business, I think it's best if you vacate my grandfather's office. He may be stepping back from day-to-day operations, but this is still his office." "Of course," Robert said, with false graciousness, standing up. "We'll continue this in the boardroom. Gentlemen, shall we?" As they filed out, Harold Winters lingered behind. Once the others were out of earshot, he turned to me. "Madison, I want you to know, I'm not part of whatever game they're playing. Your grandfather has been good to me for 20 years, and I owe him my loyalty." I studied him for a moment before nodding. "Thank you, Harold. That means a lot. I'm going to need allies today." "You'll have more than you think," he assured me, before following the others out. Over the next hour, executives and managers began arriving, many stopping by to congratulate me or express their support, though I could tell some were reserving judgment until they saw how the power struggle played out. Janet Parker, our CFO, brought me a coffee and a stack of reports I might need for the meeting. "Robert's been busy this morning," she informed me. "He's been telling anyone who'll listen that your grandfather made a rash decision due to his declining health and that the board will need to implement temporary oversight for the good of the company." I shook my head in disgust. Using Grandpa's health as a weapon? Classy. "It gets worse," Janet continued. "He's hinting that if he isn't given operational control, he'll contest the ownership transfer on behalf of your mother, throwing the company into legal limbo for months or years." By 9 o'clock, the main boardroom was filled to capacity. The tension was palpable as I took my seat at the head of the table with Janet and our Chief Operating Officer, Alan Matthews, flanking me in a show of support. Robert sat directly opposite me with Marcus and Victor beside him, their expressions smug. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "As you know, my grandfather Benjamin Walker has transferred majority ownership of Walker Technologies to me effective as of 2 days ago. This meeting has been called to address questions about the transition and leadership structure moving forward." Robert didn't waste any time. "With all due respect to Madison, I think we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. While the ownership transfer may be legally binding, operational leadership of a $120 million company requires experience that Madison simply doesn't possess yet." Several heads nodded around the table. As Benjamin's son-in-law, and a businessman with substantial experience in corporate restructuring, I'm proposing a temporary arrangement where I would assume the role of acting CEO while Madison continues her professional development within the company. I noticed he conveniently left out exactly what his substantial experience entailed. That sounds reasonable, Marcus chimed in immediately. It would provide stability during the transition. Before I could respond, Robert pressed on, standing to distribute folders to everyone at the table. I've taken the liberty of outlining a strategic vision for Walker Technologies going forward. You'll find it addresses some of the stagnation we've seen in recent quarters and identifies exciting opportunities for growth and asset optimization. I opened the folder, scanning the contents quickly. What I found confirmed my worst fears. Under the guise of streamlining operations, Robert was proposing selling off our research campus in California, licensing out our most valuable patents rather than developing them ourselves, and cutting our workforce by 20%. When everyone had reviewed the materials, I stood up. Thank you, Robert, for making this meeting so efficient by showing your hand so clearly. I gestured to the documents. What you're looking at isn't a growth strategy, it's a liquidation plan. Robert isn't interested in running Walker Technologies, he's interested in stripping it for parts. Robert's face darkened. That's an outrageous accusation. Is it? I countered, opening my own folder and passing out documents Janet had helped me prepare. Page 3 shows Robert's proposal to sell our Silicon Valley research campus, which happens to sit on land that has tripled in value since we purchased it. Page 7 outlines his plan to license our secure communication patents to Axiom Technologies, which coincidentally had a representative at my birthday party speaking extensively with Robert. The room grew quiet as board members reviewed the information. Our research campus is currently developing technologies that could double our market share in the next 3 years, I continued. But that doesn't matter if your goal is short-term profit at the expense of long-term growth. This is ridiculous, Robert sputtered. Benjamin himself has discussed some of these very same options. That's a lie, came a firm voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see my grandfather entering the boardroom, impeccably dressed in one of his best suits. I've never considered selling our research campus or gutting our workforce. Those are the actions of someone looking to cash out, not build legacy. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as Grandpa made his way to stand beside me. Madison, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, I think it's time we move to phase 2. Before Robert could interject, the boardroom door opened again, and my mother walked in looking tense and uncomfortable. Behind her came a man in a suit I didn't recognize, carrying a briefcase. What is this? Robert demanded, his composure slipping. Elizabeth, what are you doing here? My mother avoided his gaze, taking a seat at the far end of the table. Benjamin called me, said I needed to hear some things for myself. The man with the briefcase stepped forward. My name is Michael Donovan. I'm a private investigator hired by Mr. Walker to look into Robert Chambers's background and business activities. Robert lunged to his feet. This is completely inappropriate, Elizabeth, we're leaving. Sit down, Robert, my grandfather commanded with such authority that Robert complied automatically. Before you try to take over my company, you might want to hear what Mr. Donovan has discovered about your past ventures. The investigator opened his briefcase, removing a thick folder. Robert Chambers, born Robert Chamberlain, has been involved in 3 similar situations over the past decade. In each case, he married into a family with significant business assets, maneuvered himself into a position of control, liquidated company assets for cash, and moved on. His last wife, Caroline Mercer, of Mercer Electronics, lost $40 million in company value before their divorce was finalized. The boardroom erupted in murmurs as Mr. Donovan continued detailing Robert's history of corporate raiding disguised as marriages. With each revelation, my mother seemed to shrink further into her chair, her face ashen. When the investigator finished, Robert stood again. His charm completely evaporated. This is all circumstantial and taken out of context. Elizabeth, tell them this is ridiculous. But my mother was staring at him, as if seeing him for the first time. You told me Mercer Electronics was a competitor you'd worked with. not a company you married into and destroyed." "That's not what happened," he insisted, but his desperation was showing. "There's more," Grandpa said quietly. "Mr. Donovan, please tell the board about the meetings Robert has been having with Axiom Technologies." The investigator nodded. "We have documented evidence of 4 meetings between Mr. Chambers and Axiom's CEO in the past month alone. Based on intercepted communications, they were discussing the potential acquisition of Walker Technologies' patent portfolio, following what they referred to as the upcoming restructuring." The revelation was the final straw. Harold Winters stood up, his face flushed with anger. "I've heard enough. I move that we formally acknowledge Madison Walker as the rightful majority owner and leader of this company, and that we remove Robert Chambers from the premises immediately." "I second the motion," Janet said firmly. "All in favor?" Grandpa asked, looking around the table. The response was unanimous, even from Marcus and Victor, who were clearly scrambling to distance themselves from Robert. "Security has been notified," my grandfather added, as 2 uniformed guards appeared at the boardroom door. "They'll escort you out, Robert." Robert's face contorted with rage. "This isn't over. Elizabeth, let's go." My mother stayed seated, not looking at him. "I think I'll stay for the rest of the meeting, Robert." As security led a fuming Robert away, the boardroom settled into a stunned silence. Grandpa broke it by turning to me with a proud smile. "Madison, I believe this board meeting is now yours to conduct." Taking a deep breath, I moved to the head of the table. "Thank you, everyone. Now let's discuss the actual future of Walker Technologies, shall we?" After the dramatic board meeting, we took a short recess. Board members and executives huddled in small groups, processing the revelations about Robert and discussing what it all meant for the company. My mother remained seated at the far end of the table, looking shell-shocked and avoiding eye contact with everyone. I stepped outside, with my grandfather needing a moment to collect my thoughts. "You knew," I said quietly. "You knew exactly what he was planning." Grandpa nodded, leaning slightly on his cane. "I suspected from the beginning, but I needed proof. That's why I hired Donovan 6 months ago, right after their engagement. The timing of their relationship was too convenient, especially given Robert's sudden interest in the company." "And the ownership transfer, was that always the plan?" "Always," he confirmed. "You were always going to inherit the company, Madison. I just accelerated the timeline when I realized what Robert was up to, but I knew transferring ownership wouldn't be enough. He'd still try to manipulate his way into control, using your mother's influence and your inexperience against you." "So you set a trap," I realized. "You let him think he had an opening." Grandpa's eyes twinkled. "Sometimes the best way to catch a predator is to appear vulnerable, but you handled yourself brilliantly in there, better than I could have hoped." When we reconvened the meeting, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The board members who had initially seemed skeptical of my leadership were now attentive and respectful. After we addressed several pressing business matters, and I outlined my vision for the company's future, Grandpa cleared his throat. "There's one more matter we need to discuss today," he announced. "What I'm calling Phase 2 of our transition plan." He nodded to Mr. Donovan, who had remained in the room, and the investigator distributed new folders to everyone present. "When I transferred company ownership to Madison," Grandpa explained, "I anticipated the kind of resistance we witnessed today. That's why I simultaneously established a separate trust fund for her, independent of Walker Technologies." I opened my folder in surprise, scanning the documents inside. "This trust," Grandpa continued, "is valued at $50 million, comprising investments, property, and liquid assets, completely separate from the company. It ensures that Madison's personal financial security can never be used as leverage against her business decisions." The room broke into murmurs again, as I stared at my grandfather in shock. The trust documents detailed not just the financial assets, but also a fully furnished executive apartment in the city's most exclusive district, a comprehensive insurance package, and investment portfolios diversified across multiple industries. Additionally, Grandpa raised his voice slightly to regain everyone's attention. The trust includes provisions for maintaining the company's integrity. Any attempt to force a sale or major restructuring requires approval from both Madison and the trust's independent board of trustees, which does not include any family members. He turned to look directly at my mother, who was reading through the documents with wide eyes. This means, Elizabeth, that even if you were to contest Madison's ownership of the company on some grounds which would be difficult given the ironclad paperwork, the trust would provide her with both the financial means to fight you and the legal protection to prevent any forced sales or restructuring. My mother looked up, her face a complex mix of emotions. You planned for everything, didn't you, Dad? I tried to, he acknowledged. When you've built something over a lifetime, you learn to protect it from all threats, even those from within your own family. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Janet broke the tension by standing up. I think I speak for the entire executive team when I say we're relieved to have such comprehensive protection for the company's future. Madison, your grandfather has given you not just ownership, but the means to truly lead independently. The meeting concluded shortly after, with board members coming to congratulate me again, this time with genuine enthusiasm rather than reservation. As they filed out, my mother remained seated, staring at the trust documents. When we were alone except for Grandpa, she finally spoke. Did you know, she asked me? About Robert? About what he was planning? I suspected, I admitted, but not the extent of it. I didn't know about his past or his meetings with Axiom. She nodded slowly, then turned to my grandfather. And you didn't think to warn me, your own daughter. Grandpa sighed heavily. Would you have believed me, Elizabeth? Or would you have accused me of trying to control your life, as you have so many times before? She had no answer for that. For what it's worth, he added more gently, I did try to suggest you slow down, get to know him better before rushing into marriage, but you were determined. Because he made me feel special, she whispered, her composure finally cracking. He made me feel like I was the center of his world. While he positioned himself to take control of our family's legacy, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. My mother looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, Madison. When he suggested you leave yesterday, I never thought. I didn't realize what he was really after. I just thought he was trying to protect the company from inexperience. Part of me wanted to reject her apology to hold on to the hurt of her betrayal. But seeing her so broken, I couldn't. He manipulated all of us, Mom. He's apparently very good at it. She wiped her eyes. What happens now? With us, I mean. That depends, I said carefully. Are you staying with him? She shook her head firmly. After what I learned today, I've already texted our family lawyer to start divorce proceedings. I don't know where I'm going to go. Grandpa stepped in. The lake house is empty. You could stay there while you figure things out. It was a generous offer, considering everything, and typical of my grandfather's capacity for forgiveness. Later that afternoon, after helping my mother pack some essentials before she left for the lake house, I returned to the office to find Grandpa waiting for me in what was now officially my office. There's one more thing we need to discuss, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Your apartment. The one mentioned in the trust. I didn't even know you owned property in the Westmont, I said, referring to the city's most prestigious address. I bought it 2 years ago as an investment, but had it renovated with you in mind. He smiled. Consider it your real birthday present. The keys are yours whenever you're ready to move in. I shook my head in amazement. You really did think of everything. I tried to, he agreed. When Robert entered the picture, I realized we needed contingencies for every scenario. The ownership transfer was just the beginning. The trust, the apartment, even having Donovan document Robert's meetings with Axiom, it was all to ensure you had what you needed to succeed no matter what happened. Thank you, I said, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Not just for the company and the trust, but for believing in me, for preparing me for this, even when I didn't realize that's what you were doing. Grandpa's eyes were suspiciously bright as he reached across the desk to squeeze my hand. "You've made me prouder than I can say, Madison. The way you handled yourself today, you proved you're more than ready for this responsibility." "I had a good teacher," I replied, returning the squeeze. As the reality of everything settled around me, I realized that in trying to take what was mine, Robert had actually accelerated my journey to independence in ways he never intended. Instead of controlling the company through me, he had forced me to stand firmly on my own, 2 feet backed by my grandfather's careful planning and unwavering faith in me. It wasn't the 22nd birthday I had expected, but it had revealed exactly who I could trust, what I was capable of, and how prepared I was to carry my family's legacy forward, stronger and more determined than ever. 6 months passed in what felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. The autumn leaves had given way to winter snow and then spring blossoms, as I settled into my role as the leader of Walker Technologies. The transition, while challenging, had gone more smoothly than I could have hoped, largely due to the groundwork my grandfather had laid and the loyal team we had built over the years. From my office window, I could see the construction of our new innovation center, a project I had greenlighted within my first month of leadership. The sun glinted off the glass and steel framework that would soon house our expanded research team, a visible symbol of the company's growth under my direction. Janet knocked on my open door, entering with a tablet in hand. "The quarterly reports just came in. I thought you'd want to see them right away." I took the tablet, scanning the numbers with growing satisfaction. "We're up 17% over projections. That puts our current valuation at 135 million. Janet finished for me, unable to hide her smile. "The board is ecstatic. Your grandfather's decision has been more than vindicated." After she left, I took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened since that fateful birthday. The company wasn't just surviving under my leadership, it was thriving. We had launched 2 new software platforms, expanded our research division, and improved employee benefits, resulting in both increased productivity and record low turnover rates. The personal changes had been equally significant. I had moved into the apartment my grandfather had prepared for me, a stunning 2-bedroom space in the Westmont, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city park. The independence it provided was exhilarating, after years of living under my mother's roof. Speaking of my mother, our relationship was slowly healing. After her divorce from Robert was finalized, she had stayed at the lake house for several months, using the time for self-reflection. Our weekly dinners had been awkward at first, but gradually evolved into genuine reconnection, as she worked to understand how she had been so thoroughly deceived. "I wanted so badly to be taken care of that I couldn't see who he really was," she had admitted during one particularly honest conversation. "I've spent my whole life looking for someone to solve my problems instead of facing them myself, just like Dad always said." The humility in her voice had touched me. For perhaps the first time, she was taking responsibility for her choices, rather than blaming circumstances or other people. It was a profound change, and one that gave me hope for our future relationship. Robert had not gone quietly into the night. As expected, he had attempted to contest both the divorce settlement and the company ownership transfer, claiming manipulation and undue influence. However, the evidence Grandpa's investigator had gathered about his past business dealings and his meetings with Axiom Technologies had not only derailed his legal challenges, but had also resulted in investigations by the Securities and Exchange Commission into his previous corporate activities. Last I heard, he had fled to South America to avoid pending charges, his carefully constructed facade of respectability completely shattered. My phone buzzed with a reminder: lunch with Grandpa at our favorite bistro. I gathered my things, telling my assistant I'd be back for the 2 o'clock meeting. Grandpa was already seated at our usual corner table when I arrived, looking healthier than he had in years. Relieved of the daily stresses of running the company, he had focused on his health, working with a physical trainer and nutritionist. The results were remarkable, with improved energy and a vibrancy I hadn't seen since my childhood. "There's my CEO," he greeted me warmly, standing to give me a hug, right on time as always. After ordering, we fell into our comfortable routine of discussing both business and personal matters. I updated him on the latest company developments, though he still served as chairman of the board and kept well informed. "I just came from a meeting with the R&D team," he told me excitedly. "Their work on the secure communication platform is revolutionary. If it tests as well as expected, it could open entirely new markets for us." "I know," I grinned. "I approved their budget increase last week." Henderson nearly fell out of his chair when I told him they could hire those 2 MIT graduates they've been courting. Grandpa's eyes twinkled with pride. "You've exceeded every expectation I had, Madison, and my expectations were already sky high." "I had a good foundation to build on," I acknowledged, "and an excellent mentor." After lunch, we took a detour to visit the construction site of the Innovation Center. As we stood watching the workers, Grandpa turned to me. "Do you remember what I told you when you were 16 after you presented that business model for your economics class?" I smiled at the memory. "You said that success in business isn't just about profit margins and market share. It's about building something that matters, something that lasts beyond your lifetime." "Exactly," he nodded. "Looking at what you've accomplished in just 6 months, I know Walker Technologies will not only last, but will continue to grow and evolve long after both of us are gone. That's the true measure of success." Back at the office, I reflected on everything I had learned through this experience. The betrayal by my mother and Robert had been painful, but it had forced me to stand firmly in my own power. I had discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed, and capabilities that surprised even me. More importantly, I had learned to trust my instincts. When Robert first entered our lives, something had felt off, but I had dismissed those feelings out of respect for my mother's happiness. Now I understood the importance of honoring those intuitive signals even when they were uncomfortable or inconvenient. I had also learned about preparation and foresight from my grandfather. His ability to anticipate Robert's moves and prepare countermeasures had saved our family legacy. It wasn't just luck or resources that had protected us, but careful planning and strategic thinking. Perhaps the most valuable lesson was about the nature of wealth and inheritance. My grandfather hadn't just left me money and a company. He had invested years in preparing me to handle both responsibly. The true inheritance was the knowledge, values, and skills he had imparted, not just the material assets. As the day drew to a close, I stood at my office window, watching the sunset paint the city in gold. My phone chimed with a text from my mother, confirming our dinner plans for the weekend. Another notification reminded me of tomorrow's mentoring session with a group of young women from the local business school, an initiative I had started to help nurture the next generation of female leaders. My life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined on my 22nd birthday, but I wouldn't change a moment of it. The challenges had forged me into a stronger, wiser person, and the betrayals had clarified who truly had my best interests at heart. I thought about all the people watching this video, perhaps facing their own family conflicts or betrayals. If you're going through something similar right now, remember that sometimes the most painful experiences can lead to unexpected growth and opportunities. Trust your instincts, stand your ground when you know you're right, and remember that your worth isn't determined by those who fail to value you properly. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to take advantage of you? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing your ground can lead to greater strength and independence. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, the true measure of inheritance isn't what's given to you, but what you build with it. Until next time, this is Madison Walker, wishing you the courage to create your own legacy.